Hey folks, welcome to the February 11th, 2025 SIG Windows community meeting. This is a recorded meeting and will be uploaded to YouTube, so please adhere to the CNCF Code of Conduct, which basically translates to be nice and kind to everyone. All right, let's kick this off. Any announcements? Nothing from me at the moment. I don't know about Mark and Okladu or someone else has any announcements, but nothing from me.
I think just enhancements freeze this week. That's the only thing I'm aware of.
All right, we can talk about the KEPs. I guess I see a couple of agenda items regarding KEPs, so we can talk about it then. Want to give a few moments for any new contributors who want to say hi and introduce themselves. It's totally optional, but
Yeah, I guess I'll introduce myself. It's my first time here. Hey everyone, my name is Sriram. I am mostly active in SIG node and SIG release, and yeah, it's my first time in a SIG Windows meeting, so happy to be here.
hey, welcome, Sriram. Happy to have you. We're always looking for folks to, or helping and contributing. So let us know if we can help you in any ways, and we'll get you onboarded. All right, I will hand it over to Mark, who wants to talk about the retroactive KEP he's been working on.
Yeah, I think just not too, like we've discussed this in the past. I think the KEP is mostly done. There's one or two sections that I'm going to go and refine later this afternoon. The PRI reviewer, Marcy, wanted to see a little bit more details about some of the unit tests that we already have that are running on Windows nodes and things like that. So I was going to go fill that out. Yeah, if people have time, please go take a look at this. Like, no real surprises, especially because this has already been implemented. So it's just, I think the spotlight's on making sure that the things aren't going to break when we remove the feature gates eventually. So.
All right, sounds good, Mark. Are you waiting on reviews from basically someone from networking, or?
So I was speaking with Michael Zappa, who's one of the networking chairs, and he said he was going to take a look at it. I am waiting for that, and James is out. I think he left a few comments. It would be good to have somebody from SIG Windows also reviewer comment on this as well. I think James is out until Thursday, so it might be tight to get that in. So yeah, if somebody from Windows could look at it too, that would be good.
Yeah, I can take a look, but other folks should also take a look who have a better networking background, Windows networking background than I do. So, all right, we can move on to the next agenda item. Mark, again, unit test updates.
I think this one will be pretty quick as well, but I think some folks are still concerned about the Golang and the symlink regression that happened late in 132, and I got pulled into some side conversations, which unfortunately I aren't in any of the public Slacks, about the unit test coverage that we have for Windows. And after a bunch of discussions happened with Ben the Elder too, he actually they were actually not even aware that we had all of the unit tests that were running. I know Claudio put a ton of work into that, and after some discussions with some other folks that were looking at it and I think are more agreeable to get onto to get it to where those jobs are release informing. So I think some of the things that Ben wanted to see for the unit test job to be release informing is get it to run in under 1 hour. Do a little bit of cleanup so that the job fails correctly if any of the unit tests fail. Right now, the job always reports passing, but the when test grid loads the jobs, it parses the JUnit files in there and fails, and a couple other cleanup things like that, and also have a job that is green right now, even if we have to skip known failures. So I took a quick look and I bumped the skew from the VM skew that we run those jobs on from 2 to 8 cores, and that brought the job down from 2 hours to about 40 minutes. And then I also did a little bit of work to run the to enumerate all of the packages and run the go test sum binary against each package in parallel, and that brought the job down to 26 minutes. So I think without too much work, we can get the job down to under an hour. And then wanted to discuss the next steps here. I think what we should probably do is fork or like clone the job and have one job that's running with the known unit or with the failures, so that we can keep pressure on some of those PRs that I know like Claudio had to open for a while. I think a bunch of those merged last release, but you'll have one job that's clean with the known failures being skipped right now and open up issues for any of the new known failures and work towards those. And then I think we can make a case to have a release informing job, which I think would go a long way in having it so that we can have those jobs run and block PRs that introduce new unit test failures and get more pressure on the other unit test failures. Looks like right now there's, out of the packages that we are running tests against, we're back up to 88 test failures, but I'd say probably 60% of those are DRA tests, which with the current, I think because of the state of DRA, right now those are expected, so we should skip those or mark the tests as skipped for Windows. So I know Claudio did a bunch of work here too, so wanted to have some, see if you had any comments. He's on the call.
Yeah, a bit of good luck there. I mean, I've been trying to get it to play green for quite a while. I also tried having the skips as well, but you know, those pull requests basically never got reviewed. So more and more tests were added which were failing. So it was basically a never-ending cycle. If we somehow can put pressure, hey, merge this, please, finally, please. Then yeah, that would be great. Most of the failures are pretty generic, but it is a bit time consuming to solve all of them, unfortunately. So
Yeah, I feel like it's whack-a-mole. Like the longer we go without having a strong signal, the more test failures are going to slip in, which is going to cause the job to look worse than it is as well. So I totally hear that. Like now might be an opportune time to just, I know we had talked about it in the past, like do we want to skip the known failures to have a clean signal so that we can at least not like stop the bleeding and not introduce more regressions or not? I
I
think
mean, we already have some script tests, exactly because of this reason. But you know, since those tests are basically spread everywhere, the pull requests are always played in multiple batches. Some of them went a lot faster, because you know, some package containers were a bit more receptive to those. Others were, you know, a bit more unresponsive. So hopefully this won't happen in this case as well. I do remember that at one point, I think we were down to a handful of failing tests. Now we're up to, I don't know, 80 or something you mentioned. That's quite the number.
yeah. Yeah, let me try like let's try and merge the thing to run it in parallel and show that we brought the jobs down to about 26, and then Ben wanted me to, I forgot where exactly, but start a conversation in one of the either release channels or architecture about doing a release informing job, and it sounded like he would be supportive of having a release informing periodic job for now that we can monitor. Then I think we can use that as leverage to get more of the fixes in instead of the skips. Does that sound like a good plan?
I think the scripts are can be done easily. For example, it can be, you know, send the request tomorrow, and if they if they really want to, they can merge it as soon as possible. Then we can fix them. I really want to have them fixed, ideally, because in some cases, real bugs do actually exist in those failures. For example, I do remember in one case we were actually unable to rotate container logs because of how Windows handles files. For example, you cannot rename an open file in Windows, which is normal in Linux. That was an issue which existed, and I think we saw that in the past. So ideally we solved it, but at the very least now I'd like to skip that if can be merged as soon as possible.
Yeah, I remember that too. And hopefully we can catch issues like the SIG path behavior changes before it becomes a big issue with all of this too. So okay, well, yeah, unfortunately or fortunately, it seems like it requires kind of a fire to bring awareness to this. So I think we should take advantage of that, even though it's kind of an unfortunate circumstance, and see if we can get this all the way to release informing while people are interested.
Yeah, I think it's a good tactic, Mark, to kind of, when there's a spotlight on it, try and use that spotlight to kind of get it to release informing. I know we've been wanting to do this for a while, so.
Yep.
Right, sounds good. If folks, there are no further comments on this, we can move to the next agenda item, which is from Sriram, following up on the container stop signal KEP.
Yeah, so the gist of this KEP is that we are adding stop signal to the container spec. Sorry, not the container spec, like that is changed. We are adding stop signal as a new lifecycle hook so that when we are creating pods, we are able to specify the stop signal with which we want the pod to be killed in the spec itself. And currently, this is like we are only able to do this by configuring the stop signal in the image itself, or by having like a pre-stop hook with where we like manually send the signal to kill the process. So the question that I had was, what do we mean when we say like when we want to support Windows for such a feature? Like there was already a discussion in the PR about what we mean by Windows support. I think this is that particular thread. And from what Mark had posted, like what I can understand is that the sort of intersection for the common signals which are available in both like Unix and Windows environment for Windows containers are sigterm and sigkill. So all the other ones are not like all the other signals available in Windows are like control events which are not there for Linux environments. So I want to understand what should be our like graduation criteria in terms of Windows support, like is supporting sigterm and sigkill like considered to be like best effort like support, or like yeah, basically how we want to
Yeah.
go ahead with this in terms
I
of Windows.
commented on this.
Yeah.
I apologize for not getting back. I read through the KEP and then I got distracted, and this was on my list of things to look at today as well. So I'm glad that this came up again. Yeah, so like I think I linked to the HCS shim, which is what sits on top of, or sits underneath both container D and the old Docker implementations for containers. And it did look like those for Windows containers, those we intercept, or we like honor the sigterm and sigkill and a bunch of those control signals. Those control signals are more specific to any application that uses like the Win32 app frameworks, like Windows specific APIs. So I don't think we'll have any. I don't think it would make sense to expose them from at the container level, since I don't think that there any mention of them in any of the OCI specs. So I think when I read the KEP, I think there were still some discussions around like how does this get exposed to the users? I think there were some discussions around we should have the container runtime query or like kubelet query the container runtime to get the default value from the container image if it's not specified to preserve that state in the container spec. I don't
Yep.
know what was happening with that, but I think from for Windows, I think it would make sense if we can identify a Windows pod, and right now the way to do that is opt in, and I believe that's also commented in there. If it's a OS, under in the pod spec, there's an OS field and a named field, and if that's set to Windows, we should probably validate that only SIG term or SIG, was it SIG term or SIG kill are specified in there. And I don't, was there a decision on what to, I think that the default was just pulled from the container image. Is that the correct for this, for the
Yeah.
behavior for Linux?
Yep.
I think we could probably just do that for Windows as well. So I think maybe just add a little bit of extra validation if the OS or if the pod is designated as a Windows pod to just make sure it's either SIG term or SIG kill if specified. Arvin, Claudio, anybody, do you have any thoughts on that?
What if it specify otherwise? Do we want to fail or set to default?
Probably if a user is explicitly opting, like designating it as a Windows pod and setting it to a, well, on, well, let me think. So I know in Kubernetes, we usually try to make it so that in the future we don't loosen validation, or we don't tighten validation unexpectedly on users. So that means if there's a chance that Windows could support more stop signals in the future, we should probably not fail the validation. But I don't know if, because then it would be harder to kind of like update the container runtime and HTS-shim to support those signals and then loosen the validation in the kubelet. But I don't know if there's any plans for supporting more generic signals in Windows, like signals in Windows, or what that would mean. Do you have any thoughts in that area, Yuan?
Yeah.
Or yeah, or anybody?
Yeah. Sorry, Yuan.
Go ahead. Sorry. So as far as I know, Windows will only support SIG term SIG kill at this moment. Yeah.
I mean, I think my question is, so we have the only way to say that a pod is a Windows pod is with the OS spec field, right? And I think we should do whatever we do with the other security features that are Linux only versus Windows only. I think if you specify a Linux only security field for a Windows pod, I don't think the pod comes up off the top of my head, but somebody should correct me if I'm wrong.
I believe that that's correct. I think like IPC, like interprocess communication for the pods, and a couple of those things, we do fail validation. If I think that the behavior is if you don't if you don't designate the pod as a Windows pod, but with that OS field, but you do add things like a node selector to ensure it only lands on a Windows pod, the API validation will pass if if you specify some Linux only fields. And I don't think that the kubelet would check some of those fields. So I think you're right. We should have the same behavior here. I think if you say that this is a Windows pod, we should probably during the API validation fail if we know that if the signal is outside of either sig term or sig kill. And I think that is consistent with what happens for the for the rest of the pod validation.
Yeah, I think that's what I would suggest, Sriram, that you do is follow the same behavior that we have with the security fields in conjunction with the pod OS field. So I think the TLDR is if the pod OS field is set to Windows and then you try to put an option that only works with Linux, yeah, fail the validation in the API. But I think if you don't specify that this pod is actually a Windows pod by using the OS spec field, yeah, then you kind of let it go through, and it's in many ways, I think, undefined behavior. What will happen, at that instant? I think we had a lot of discussions around how do you authoritatively say that this is a Windows pod, and we just finally said it's the spec field, pod OS spec field, that'll tell us. Otherwise, yeah, it's unknown in some sense.
Right. So is the final decision to not support stop signal for ports which are marked as Windows ports?
That's what yeah. Go ahead, Mark.
I think we should still support stop signal, but don't do the validation to make sure, so don't do the validation. So if a user says, if the user says that the pod is a Windows pod, do validation on to make sure that the stop signal is specified as either sig term or sig kill. If it's not
Right.
designated, just skip the validation and let the container start, and then hope that the users
Right.
put in the correct one.
So I believe in the POC that I had done for this, I had not added very much validation. So I believe we would still need some sort of validation to restrict the field to valid stop signal values, even for Linux. So in the case of Windows, it is just that a similar validation would be there, but we restrict it even further so that we only allow sig term and sig kill, which are supported by Windows right now. And one more question I had related to the pod OS field. What if we create a static pod? I understand that sort of that the static pods bypass the API server validation, so we would still need to check for the spec field at that point of time, the kubelet, and then
Let me
validate
double check in the kubelet code. So I think for some of the fields in the security context, I know we do validation at admission time, so in the API server. If I don't remember if we do any validation for those fields in the kubelet. I think if we do the validation for some of those in the kubelet when we're building the basically the CRI calls, I know which file it's in, but I forgot exactly where it is. If we do that for some of the security context fields, I think we should also do validation for the security context fields in the kubelet. So there would be validation in the API server if and only if the pod OS name is set to Windows. And then if there is other precedent for the kubelet doing validation in Windows specific code paths, we should probably do that validation there and fail and expose a nice message. So I can get that answer pretty quickly for you if you're wrong. So and if that's the case, then the static pods would go through that kubelet, that extra layer of kubelet validation. And if not, I think we would skip it because that's how the behavior is for a lot of other OS specific fields in the kubelet.
The other KEP that you had mentioned, which has similar behavior, is security context, right? So I can probably refer to that and see how things are done there.
Yeah. The pod security policies. Yes, there's a lot of work with that.
Yep. All right. Yeah. So to summarize, I will update the cap later today and tag you for review. Yeah. And oh yeah, one more question. Sorry. Given that we are going to support SIGDERM and SIGKIL, like, would it be any different? Like, would the container runtime behavior be any different, or would the container runtime code that needs to pass these signals to the HCS ship be the same as that of how it is done in Linux environments? Like, the container D has a stop container function.
It should be, yeah. So right now, only Container D supports Container D and possibly the like Mirantis container engine support Windows. The only open source one now is the Container D, and that should act the same way. Except when the stop container signal happens in Container D, instead of calling out, it calls into the run HCS library, which we linked there. So I don't think any changes would need to happen for the container run, like in the runtime aspect.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Thanks for bringing this up, Sriram. We can follow this up over Slack also if you need more help in this area. Just tag Mark or someone on SIG Windows Slack, and we can help you there too.
Yep, thank you so much.
So yeah, here's the file that I was thinking of. This builds in Kube runtime Windows. This handles the Windows specific portions of that, and I'll check the not Windows flavor of this too. I don't see us doing any validation here to check if some of the Linux specific security context fields are set and fail. We only check the Windows specific values here. So let me check the common file to see if we do the validation. Oh, Kube runtime container Windows. But yeah, we could follow offline. We could follow up offline.
Yep, that works.
We are almost up on time, but the only other thing that I wanted to just call upon is I know Jordan has been pinging us weekly about adjusting the symlink behavior on Windows. I think the issue that Mansi volunteered to work on, is Mansi on the call?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Mansi.
yeah. So I had some updates on that, and I think I made a list of what all we need to change. I might need some help testing it. So yeah, I think that's probably we should be able to wrap it up soon if I
Okay.
get some testing. Yeah, I'll try to work on that more this week and bring someone from the team. I think. Not sure if James is around, but I think he said he can help.
I think James is out of office until at least Thursday. If it's before then, feel free to reach out to me.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, just start a thread on SIG Windows, Mansi, tag Mark and James, and we can take it from there. Also, just update Jordan. I know he pings us in a separate thread about these updates. Just add whatever the current status is so that he knows what's going on.
Right, okay.
All right, sounds good. And we are out of time, so I will stop the recording and I will see everybody on Slack then. Thank you, folks.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.
Everyone.